Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Daishi Hoshi, a student teacher at the Village Zendo, and have been practicing with Fugan and Seigan for many years in different places and forms, and it's a delight to be joining you today. And to everybody online, also a delight. I see little boxes of people. I wanted to start by noticing kind of what we're doing. Many of us traveled quite a distance to be here. Maybe some of you had a shorter commute, but everyone made some kind of effort to come to this room. And when we entered the room, it was quite ornately and carefully arranged. This floor is very clean. All the cushions were in the right place. We sat down, and whether you're working on a koan or following your breath, you came back to it many, many times, over and over again. For me, and maybe for many of you, the reason I'm here today is because there are many people who are not here today that have made it so that I could be here today. We can go back into our ancestry, but I need not go much further back to my wife, who's taking care of my two children for the day. I know some of you are in a similar position. I'm very grateful for that. I couldn't be here if it wasn't for that effort that isn't explicitly in this room. Anyone who's watching this online, I'm not going to try and unpack all the technology involved, but it's a lot going on so that you can watch this video. And at the risk of being somewhat mystical, if this video is recorded, all of our future selves may also watch that video at some point in the future, or relatives, and kind of remember what it was like to be here in this day. So all of this is woven into the moment that we're now sharing. And to glimpse this vast field of effort and causes and conditions, for me, kind of softens the heart a little bit. I find it, I often use the word tenderizing, and kind of humbling. Humbling for me because if there's something I just mentioned that we weren't aware of before I mentioned it, it kind of suggests there might be a lot more that we're not even aware of that's helping us be here today. So we subtly are kind of reminded that there's always much more arising and falling than what our little conscious mind stream can hold or even imagine. It can feel just like an achy knee, but what is unfolding here is immeasurably large than anything we can really grasp with our minds. the causes and conditions extend backwards, millennia, actually. Some of these traditions are being passed down and resonating with us too, and they will kind of extend into the futures in ways we can't even imagine. And I'll add, for everything I mentioned we are doing, there's also so much I'm not doing by being here with you today. A very easy one for me to be grateful for is I haven't looked at my phone. That's not a small thing for me. I haven't checked my email. I haven't raised my voice. And if I spent the entirety of this talk enumerating all of these causes and conditions, we would never reach the end. But we can allow the awareness of this vastness to work on us. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen monk and poet and peace activist, who many of you may be aware of, offered a simple and gently provocative claim, which is to live in the present moment, he said, is a miracle. And that's what I want to explore today, is miracles. So miracle is a very, it's a big word, a concept that has traveled through centuries, languages, around the world many, many times. And maybe perhaps because it's so old, it's loaded with connotations and trappings. A miracle, perhaps we think, must be a high and heavenly experience that is quite separate from little, lowly, earthly us. It comes to us in the English form via Old French and before that Latin. Miraculum means an object of wonder. And it's from mirare, to wonder, and miris, wonderful. So at its root, a miracle is an experience that evokes wonder. But in many traditions, miracles are often seen as divine interventions, interruptions in the natural order. This distinction or duality between miracle as something supernatural and something that is part and parcel of the natural order of things got even further distinguished by thinkers during the Enlightenment. One I learned about during this talk was David Hume, who famously defined miracles as violations of natural law and thereby making them kind of suspect to the rational mind. Dogen Zenji, the founder of the Soto school of Japanese Zen, and a lineage that we are all swimming in right now, addresses miracles directly in a fascicle entitled Miracles in his famous writings, the Shobo Genzo. And Dogen does what Dogen oftenly does, which is complicate and ultimately kind of overturn the common distinction between ordinary and extraordinary. So Dogen does not deny that supernatural abilities and experiences may arise, but he calls these events minor miracles. The reason I call them minor miracles, he says, is that they are limited by circumstances and depend on special practices and realizations. They may appear at times other than the present moment, but not at the present moment. So if what we may kind of conventionally think of as miracles are the minor miracles, what in this tradition, in our tradition, is the great miracle? Thich Nhat Hanh says, to live in the present moment is a miracle. Dogen says, Buddhas abide in and transmit great miracles. Great miracles are omnipresent. They require no special talent. They are not bound by circumstance, and they are not separate from the functioning of reality itself. Dogen quotes layman Pang Yon, who's a very celebrated Chinese lay Buddhist and Zen master, in his fascicle, who's widely respected both for his deep insight and his practice while living an ordinary non-monastic life with his wife and children. So Dogen recounts that one day layman Pang said, "Miracles are nothing other than fetching water and carrying wood." Other Zen koans and kind of all of the other liturgical nuance, the bowing and much more, I think they can trap people in either seduction or a kind of repulsion because of their complexity and the feeling, maybe particularly among koans, of their impenetrability or a sense of overwhelm. When I read Dogen, sometimes I feel quite overwhelmed. But this koan, layman Pang's koan of miracles are nothing other than fetching water and carrying firewood, or Thich Nhat Hanh's koan of to live in the present moment is a miracle, they risk being passed over not because of their complexity, but because they are so simple. The words are so easy to understand intellectually. But Zen is also very famous for being a tradition of practice, of grokking. Or as Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen Buddhism, famously said, this is a tradition beyond scriptures, with no dependence on words and letters. So the real Zen question is, can you realize the present moment when fetching water or carrying wood or feeling your achy knee as a miracle? The good news is that the present moment is inescapable. So Dogen, layman Pang, and Thich Nhat Hanh's framing of miracles encourage us not to seek miracles, but to ask if the great miracle is here, in this breath, this posture, this sound, this traffic jam, what prevents us from recognizing it? In her book, the Sabbath world, Judith Shulevitz, speaks of how engaging with inherited religious language, like miracle, or perhaps some of our chants, or a koan you may be working on, may feel like, and I really love this image, wrapping your tongue around a fossil. Words and practices that feel dry, distant, and drained of vitality. I think old religious texts may be particularly fossil-like. But I think if we look closely, we will likely find patterns of calcification in our day-to-day life. When cleaning the dishes, when sitting in traffic. Can you tell I have been sitting in a lot of traffic recently? When finding oneself performing the same emotional repertoire for colleagues or our loved ones day in and day out. So Judith invites us to bake these words in the fire of community and time. And I would add to that intimacy. To bake the fossils in intimacy, the close, upright attention that we practice most explicitly in our Zazen, which transforms old forms like breathing and sitting and walking and standing and bowing and chanting and eating, and even words like miracle into experience. They become alive again through the wholehearted, intimate engagement with them. So the issue is not that miracles are absent. The issue is that we stop seeing. Human perception is shaped by habit, and what's repeated becomes automated. And what is automated kind of fades from awareness. I've quoted him before in a Dharma talk. I can't get away from him. The Russian literary theorist Viktor Shklovsky wrote this little document called Art as Technique. And he describes this as the automatism of perception. Here's what I mean by that, or rather, this is what he means by that. Habitualization, he says, devours work, clothes, furniture, one's wife, and the fear of war. Habitualization just devours work, clothes, furniture, one's wife, and the fear of war. And art exists that one may recover the sensation of life. It exists to make one feel things, to make the stone stony. So art for Shklovsky is the deliberate defamiliarization of the familiar. It slows down art, perception, it disrupts automatic seeing, and it returns the world to its original vividness. I think Zen training operates similarly to art. In meditation and chanting and kinhin and sweeping the temple and in sweeping the mind, we're invited into a quality of attention that allows the familiar to become unfamiliar again. Suzuki Roshi calls this beginner's mind, the mind that meets each moment without preconception. And when we sit and simply allow breath to be breath, or confusion to be confusion, intimacy emerges. The rigid labels loosen and the world becomes fresh. So this great miracle of direct encounter with each moment, not an escape from the ordinary, but its deepest expression. How does this land? How does this land for you? Does it feel disappointing? Were we all kind of secretly, or not so secretly, hoping for a better miracle? Or maybe it feels liberating. Miracles abide. In fact, you really cannot escape them. Can we practice a kind of disappointed liberation? So our Zen rituals and koans, much like kind of our day-to-day, can sometimes evoke that fossil-like quality, and we may feel repetitive, rigid, or disappointingly ordinary. I think there is often a moment in practice, particularly if we've been practicing for some time, when we think, like, this is it? Just this? And the very clear teaching response to that is yes, just this. The miracle is not in escaping form, it is in entering it fully. So when the chant, the bow, the breath, the sore knee, the quiet room, the very loud room become intimate, not conceptual or symbolic, but alive, they regain a kind of original pulse. The fossil warms, the stone becomes stony. I was telling my wife about the struggles I was having with this Dharma talk, and I was kind of going over a bit of the outline, and she said, "You haven't told a personal story yet." And I said, "Oh, you're right." And she encouraged me to do that. And immediately, two miracles came to mind. One was this summer, I had really set this attention to spend more time with my 6-year-old. I'm busy, and even though it's such a deep kind of vow and intention, I just felt like I was missing so much of that. And so that intention was in the background, right? You all have vows and intentions, and then things happen. And his name's Boaz. Boaz was sitting on my lap. And I was all in a kerfuffle because I had 7 things to do. And I was texting my wife. This is the middle of summer vacation. I just don't have time to do this thing, that thing, or the other thing. And she texted me back and she said, "Boaz is sitting on your lap." Oof. It was a miracle. Just everything shifted for me. I just reconnected for a moment with, like, my 6-year-old is sitting on my lap. About 25 years ago, those who know me know that I have a very close relationship with my grandmother, and she was getting towards the end of her life, and she broke her hip, got her to the hospital, she came back, and in the middle of the night, she fell out of bed and dislocated her hip. And I was sleeping at her apartment that night, and you wake up and it's like the emergency lights go on and call the ambulance, and I'm 20 something, and we're in the back of the ambulance on the way to the hospital in the Bronx. And I am thinking to myself, really, poor me. Like, how did I get into this predicament? This is not how I wanted to spend my evening. And yes, I can't believe my poor grandmother suffering so badly, and we got into the hospital, but there was just this resistance, if I'm honest about, I didn't want her to be hurting. I didn't want to be there. I didn't like the sounds, the smell, the comfort in the ambulance. When we got to the hospital, I didn't like the way we were treated. I didn't want her to take that medicine. I didn't understand what medicine she should take. There was no place for me to stand. I could go on with how much resistance there was. And here I didn't get a text from my wife. Something shifted. And there I was, lying on a hospital room floor, holding my grandmother's hand. And I could not have been seduced to be anywhere else. There was no concert or Dharma talk or anything where I would have wanted to be somewhere else. I was so grateful for a moment to just be there. So those are some, now that I hear myself recount them, kind of extreme miracles in a sense. But what they offered as an opportunity for me was to have an experience of the nature of this great miracle that our tradition points to. A small moment whose intimacy reorganizes perception. And it is definitely not elsewhere. So I'll close with a gatha. Causes and conditions without number carry us to this seat. May intimacy loosen habit and attention soften each fossil. Wonder returns to the ordinary. Just this, a great miracle already here.